Hi, all, and welcome to Monday night's All Meta Mode podcast with Gypsy and myself, Amanda Jigger-DeGaz, and we have special guest BottleNed on tonight. So before we get introducing BottleNed, hey Gypsy, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How about you, Amanda?
Doing good. Doing good. Welcome to the first week of
Another.
August. Ish.
Yeah.
Oh, second
Man,
week.
this summer has
Yeah.
flown by, hasn't it? And Texas weather's just been so weird. It was much cooler today. It's not the usual 105 degrees every day. I don't know what's happened. But so, Amanda, were you able to get out this week and do a little treasure hunting?
I did. I got out on Thursday night and then again on Sunday. I didn't do any mudlarking. I was acquiring new permissions as there's some metal detectorists coming to Maine to come dig this weekend. So
Oh,
the big property that I used to have, I think I told you all the listeners a couple weeks ago, it's on the market. So I needed to find a place. And thankfully, detecting and giving back to a lot of these property owners, they were like, I went over, I'm like, I'm not sure where to bring them. I'm like, I'd never had this problem before. And they're like, oh, let me call so and so. And lo and behold, we got permission for a couple big properties and so excited to try out some new properties. But yeah, I did go mudlarking for a little bit just to check out the spot and kind of mix things up in case anybody this weekend wants to do some mudlarking. Didn't really find anything
cool.
great. I found a silver nickel. I
Okay.
think, what is that, like 70%
Like a war
silver?
nickel.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, or 30%, 35%, something like that.
Yeah, it's a couple clay marbles, bottle stops. I found a crystal chandelier drop. And yeah, that's about it. How about you?
Um, Sorry, my earpiece fell out just then. I, I did. I got out a couple times. I went with my friend Zola and Cinder. One day we went to a dump where we have to kayak up a river to get to this dump. And we pull out some pretty nice bottles usually, but this time a lot of the bottles that I was getting, the older bottles, were unfortunately broken. Um, but I managed to get a dog tag,
Ooh.
and I've been able to trace the guy back. He was like a lieutenant in the Air Force. I've even was able to find the cemetery, the stone, everything where he's buried. One guy emailed me the death certificate of this guy, so I was able to find out a lot of information on this guy just from that dog tag. I also found a Chinese coin, and I haven't cleaned it up enough yet to do any research on that. And then I was able to get out again to a different dump that's very close to me. And it's another dump that is along the river. And I did get a really neat, I love digging soda bottles. I know some of the soda bottles aren't as old as what our guest is probably used to digging. But I found a really cool bottle that is from a local ice house that I thought was really cool. And it has the name of the town on it as well. It does have a few dings in it, but I just thought it was really cool. So it's definitely a keeper for me. And what else did I find? What I thought was a token was a little play money and some other odds and ends. I found the coolest bottle stopper, one that I've never found, one like it. But anyway, I got some pretty cool finds, so I'll have another video there. I'm so behind in my YouTube editing because I've been doing so much traveling lately. But I did manage to squeeze out a little short video today. So if you get a chance, everyone go check that out on Zero Discrimination YouTube channel, and it's from when I was in Utah, and I was with Terry Carter, another YouTube guy, and we were hiking up the mountains to see some mystery glyphs. So if you get a chance, check that video out. It's not very long, and hopefully I'll have another video out very soon. But I leave Wednesday to head to Florida for some more beach metal detecting, and so hopefully I'll find some more rings and goodies and have some more video footage for y'all for that as well.
Awesome. Very cool.
All right. Well, yeah, it was a good week. Also, one other thing before we introduce our guest, I just got back last night. I went over to a local metal detecting club. I was asked to be their guest speaker, and it was a lot of fun. I got to speak. I even won some prizes. We even had a little metal detecting hunt out there. They had seated tokens out there for some prizes. So it was a lot of fun because, getting to meet some local metal detectorists. And I had a guest come that he's actually done some dump digging and metal detecting with me. He's only 16 years old. And he went to the meeting as well, his very first metal detecting meeting, and he had a blast. And so it's really cool to see these young treasure hunters come up and anyway, they're the future of us. So it's always good to see them having fun and enjoying the hobby and meeting local people as well.
That's awesome.
All right. You want to go ahead and introduce our special guest tonight?
Yes. So this is someone I followed for, I think, quite a while now on Instagram, but everybody give a warm welcome to BottleNed. Hey, welcome to the show. Welcome, welcome. Welcome.
Thank you very bodily much.
So I have to say, BottleNed, Ned for short. It's funny. Yeah. Amanda had sent me a link to your YouTube channel today, and I watched just a bit of it. And you had me cracking up the whole time. I love your sense of humor. It was hilarious. I loved your intro.
Not everybody does.
Well, there's
I've always wondered if I'm overdoing it. I'm like...
No, it's hilarious. I love it. Keep it up. It's,
Thank you.
I like your quirky personality. I wish I was more like that. Only
Sometimes
my
I try to tone
friends.
it down. I'm like, it's just like, oh crap, dude. I'm like, it's just kind of naturally, it's too much. I try to tone down my own energy, because I think some people would just be like, dude, just get to the part where you find stuff. The joke.
No, I love it. It makes for great entertainment, and that's what a lot of our viewers are looking for out there, is not only to be entertained, but to kind of go along that adventure with you, that digging adventure. So keep up the great work, and I think you're doing a great job. So,
that's why I really started doing it. Every dig is such an adventure. Whether you're, getting accosted by like a homeless person or just jammed up by the cops, or you get caved into a hole, or just some really dramatic, there's so many dramatic scenarios. And then mix that with, there's just so much education to be had from all the like things that you're finding and the places that you're exploring. There's just so much historical knowledge to be gained. I wanted to make it funny and just like an adventure, but also just educational storytelling, really.
Well, that's great. So tell us a little bit more about yourself. I don't even really know where you live, where you're from, and let's just start there.
Shit, I don't even know where I'm going. Oops, can I swear? Sorry. Can I swear?
Like,
It's,
yeah.
it's
Or
up
is
to
it just
you.
slipped out by accident? Do you have to edit it or?
No, you can
No,
Oh,
chat on.
it's
okay.
yeah.
All right.
Go ahead.
Anyway,
We do have a
I'm from
few young
California.
listeners.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. Some people. Yeah. I'll try to tone it down. But anyway, no. I grew up in California, a little beach town called Stinson Beach, and
Okay.
yeah. I mean, let's see. I guess we could start at the beginning. I mean, like, basically, my first word was bottle. Is what my parents told me. They confirmed I would, when I was an infant, I would climb up onto the kitchen counters and take the lids off the jars and dump the contents out of the jars and the glass jars and everything and start playing with the jars and the tops. And, I'd be like, bottle top, bottle. And then I'd be like, bottle, that's like those are the first utterances I ever had. So, yeah, I was definitely into it from somehow from birth. I don't know what it must be genetic, I guess. But by the time I was 5, my favorite place to go was a place called Glass Beach in Fort Bragg, California. It's a beach made entirely out of glass, almost. Especially back in those days, it hadn't been picked so much, so there was a lot more glass on the beach. But it was, and by the time I was 8, I just remember finding my first bottle actually, like in the natural environment. I'd always save them around the house when I was too young to go out unsupervised. But even when I went out one time with my grandparent, I was on this beach and I see this beautiful aqua bottle floating towards me in the bay. And it was like an E&J brandy bottle that was all sandblasted and it had probably been floating in the bay for a couple of years. And it was an aqua bottle. I don't know if you know those big aqua E&J brandy.
I just love the color.
Yeah, okay, yeah. They're from Modesto, so I'm not sure how far they've made it. But yeah, they're just a California product. But yeah, they're beautiful aqua. And I just started, I was amazed by it. I was 5 years old and I was going, wow, what person drank out of this bottle and how long ago? And then what was the story of how it ended up from their hands into mine, washed up on this beach all this time later. And I just remember really tripping on that when I was 5 and my parents wouldn't let me take it home because they thought it was trash. And I just was screaming and crying the whole car ride back home. And when I got back home, I was crying and screaming the whole time so much that they took me back to the beach the next morning to get the bottle, and it was still there. And so that was my first.
Oh, wow.
And then by middle school, there was a landfill, and I was digging in. Well, actually, right before that, I would follow this homeless guy around my town, and he'd always drink these like little half-pint flasks of Corbel brandy, these beautiful green flasks, and I remember he'd throw them in the bushes, and I'd wait till he passed out or left, and I'd go and grab his bottles that he threw into the bushes, and I had a whole collection of them in my room. And my mom found them one day and thought I had turned into an alcoholic at age 8. Freaked out.
I think he must have been a glass blower in the past life or something.
I know, right?
That's quite an amazing story. I love it. Love it, love it.
Actually, my great-great-grandmother died of tetanus, apparently because she cut herself digging in a dump in South Africa, like digging on an old can, digging in a dump. That's how the story goes anyway. So there could be something genetic there.
Wow. Could be. You may be right on the genetic part. Wow. Well, we like to ask a lot of questions, so I know Amanda's probably got a whole list of questions too. So, Amanda, you got a question for us?
Well, we kind of already answered the question of how long you've been treasure hunting since toddler. So, can you let the listeners know what types of treasure hunting you do?
I do. Well, mainly I look for anything buried underground that's older than I mean, I'm not very discriminating, but I'd rather have. I live in California, so the old stuff you find only dates back to the Anglo stuff. Anyway, I don't look for Native American stuff because I want to respect that stuff and leave the excavation of any of that stuff up to professionals and the tribes, and that stuff is sacred. But I go for the Anglo period when I can get it, which is 1850 and up. And the great thing about bottles made in that period is that's when they were just getting the technology to make amazing molds for glass bottles. Historical flasks were being made at that time, and beautiful soda bottles and bitters bottles. So California, basically, even though it's not as old as other parts of the country, it actually captures the key period of early American glass. So you can find some really nice Ponald stuff that they shipped out here during the gold rush. And I look for that stuff all the way up to, I'd rather stop at 1880, but there's so much. I mean, I just love all, even ACL, even those stupid ACL sodas are just, to me, those are pieces of Americana. They're beautiful painted labels and the steel beer cans. I don't know. It's all really cool. But if I had to specialize, if I had to say what I look for, I'd say it's 19th century Western blown glass, meaning glass blown at Western glass houses, and as well as other pieces of Western ephemera and any other historic objects. Basically, I can't be specific. It's really hard. Sorry.
So now to find those, you're doing privy digging. You're like old roads that are getting ripped up. You're digging under, or
anything I can get. I mean, there's less places that are old in I mean, there's lots of old places in California, but per capita, there's like less age that you have to find 1850 to 1880. So that kind of limits a lot of you'd go to the East Coast and trip and fall and find 1850s crap. But like out here, you have to really do a lot of research. So yeah, I mean, dumps are largely, they've been picked over for many, many decades in California. The easiest thing you can do to find old bottles historically speaking, is to go dig a dump. So the first thing that people did in the West in the 1950s is you throw your family into an old station wagon, like a Woody, and you drive out to the Nevada desert, to the ghost towns that used to be in the Nevada desert. These are Comstock mining boom towns, like you see in the old Western movies. And there were tons of them, and they had a lot of money, and they had all their goods shipped they sent by mules and later trains up there from San Francisco. And in the 1950s, you could pick up 1870s Western bitters and whiskey cylinders off the surface of the desert, just as many as you could pick up. And then after a certain, amount of time, all that stuff got picked up off the surface, and then people started realizing they had to pinpoint where stuff was buried underground in these dumps. And then they had to try to start digging dumps. And then the final frontier is basically privy pits, which are outhouse pits. And that's the hardest the way to find bottles, because you have to be really advanced and have probes, special tools, and know what to feel for when you're penetrating the soil with this tool, and really have an idea of what a filled-in hole from the 19th century feels like, as opposed to just natural ground or some other kind of feature that's been buried for a long time. So that's what basically is left these days. I mean, you're not going to find an undug spot, unless you get really lucky or access a property that the family has said no for decades, or, you get under a building or a sidewalk they tear up in that key period of time before they go in and they dig it out and crush it, because a lot of this stuff does unfortunately get destroyed by redevelopment. So you gotta, you get in there and they rip up an old slab or tear down a building or tear up a sidewalk, and you get in there and probe and hopefully rescue some stuff before the big equipment comes and tears it out and excavates and breaks. I mean, glass and giant backhoes don't go together. Antique glass and heavy equipment,
So that what you mainly look for?
Yeah.
You mainly look for old construction or construction site? And do you usually talk to them, or do you usually
all of the above? You know,
know?
I mean, I have someone that we dig with who has an insurance policy that covers us, you know, that he puts us under, and we're his employees technically, and it's a $5 million insurance policy, and if you get a special insurance cert for that job, and the owner and the contractor are both cool with it, which it just takes some really good permission getting skills. But if you can get all that together, then you got yourself a nice permission. And if not, you're running around like the Beverly Hills Ninja in the middle of the night trying to get what you can get with whatever situation. I mean, you name it. I'll go out to the bay and walk in the mud at low tide just because it's fun, good exercise, or maybe a dump that's eroded out of a creek bank. That's kind of like, I don't find as much that way, but I mean, a lot of the times it's when they demo some infrastructure that's in the way in a really old area, and they peel it up, and that's when you go in. But yeah, I mean, anything, you name it, the bottles are where you find them. They're everywhere. They're everywhere when you're in an area that's old, where people live, you know, historically in any period, you're walking on bottles everywhere, and everything else too, coins and marbles and dolls and every other artifact you can think of. You're walking on all that stuff. It's just ubiquitous in the ground. It's not just in privies. There's trash layers and dumps and little low spots. And there's more so out here. The West is cool because people didn't give a shit in the West because they were here to find gold, and they thought, you know, the East Coast or England or wherever I came from is my home. I'm going to come out here and exploit this land and trash it, throw my trash everywhere. Like when you go to an old miner's cabin, they threw their trash out their front door. Yeah. They didn't even bother to have a dump. They throw their trash out their front door. They're total slobs because they were these like young men from all over the world that were just like, didn't give a shit. They just came out here to, you know, get get the riches that they could from the land and drink at night and look for gold during the day. And so they'd throw their trash everywhere. And as cities were getting built, all these cities were getting lived in by all these people that were miners and capitalists and merchants and people just trying to make money and just not thinking. So, and cities were built fast in the West, and they were built over waterways and bays and places that were like, you know, filled in very quickly. And when they filled in all those low places to make flat ground they could build on, they just did it as fast as possible. And they did it with like trash. They did it with all their garbage and all their everything you can imagine. All the detritus of the gold rush, the ships and big safes and bottles. And I mean, if you just take every bottle underneath the financial district in the old Cove in downtown San Francisco, if you were to make every bottle disappear at once, the whole city would sink a foot probably. That's how much stuff is buried under there. It's ridiculous. It's built on bottles, you know.
So
That's amazing.
We do have a question in chat. So you had said about the privies. Mike has asked, what's the average depth or diameter of a privy that you've dug? Like, are there certain sizes or?
Ish. Depends on the soil type. So if it's softer soil, there's some really good loamy soil that with hardpan that isn't that far down. They could dig until infinity. Depends on the age of the town. Some places that go back to the 1850s where a bunch of people moved to in the gold rush, and there were people from Philadelphia, a lot of them. And so those privies in Philadelphia are super deep. So the people that moved to the cities, a lot of them were from the East Coast, they would dig privies that were really deep because that was their custom. Or there'd be people that it was customary to dig a privy, you know, in a more shallow way because that's the way they did it and wherever they came from. Or there could be like a really hard base where you can't penetrate through, so they just dig a wider, longer privy. instead of a deep privy. Or you could be digging a 1-story residential house, you're going to get a 6-foot hole, maybe a 5-6-foot hole. But if you're digging a hotel, you get a hole that's maybe 10 feet around and 20 feet deep. So it just depends on like how many people it service, the whole service.
Right.
And then the soil type and the location, the town, and the types of people that were living in the town, their ethnicity and where they were from.
So
I mean, average, if you want to say average, is 6 feet deep, like a grave, and 4 by 5 by 6. Yeah.
Okay.
But that's totally wildly, inconsistent.
It's going to vary, right? So,
yeah.
I'm curious. You mentioned a hotel, and to me that sounds really interesting. I've never dug a privy or a dump site to a hotel. I've dug near one and dug out some pieces of bottle, but nothing. But anyway, so have you done that?
Yeah.
I'm assuming you have. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
I've dug about maybe 75 hotel privies.
Whoa.
We dug some that were so big you could fit like 3 of my old piece of crap cars that I used to drive. Three Honda Civics from 386 Civics. You could fit them nose to nose down that hole, and you still have room. But those are those were big projects. I mean, we had somebody that's a paving and grading contractor come and dig with a backhoe and down to the layer where you could excavate by hand,
right.
and just day, you're talking days of digging just straight. I mean, this ain't no like casual walk somewhere. It's insane. But hotels are really fun or you could dig a hotel site that has 20 privies. They're all 6 feet deep, but there's 20 of them instead of like one giant mother hole.
Wow.
You just dig like 20. I've done that too. You're behind a hotel and there's 15 or 20 little privies, and the cool thing about hotels is it's people from all these different places came and stayed there. So not only is it high volume, high traffic, but so you're getting a lot of people throwing a lot of stuff away, but you're getting God, I lost my thought.
Well, it's a real
this one was getting interesting.
Eclectic,
you're getting
right?
You're getting stuff from like the East Coast, from Europe, from like everywhere you could imagine on the planet. You're getting weird stuff that people just happen to bring with them. Like, oh, this is my favorite cough syrup that I bought in Australia, and now I'm visiting, and the bottle's empty, so I'll just toss it in this privy in California. And you just look. The trick is you look for the ones with the advertisements in the city directories from the 1800s. You look for the hotels that say Chinese are not entertained either as a capacity under as under the capacity as guest or servant. You look for the racist anti-Chinese hotels basically, because if the Chinese were employed at a hotel as servants, they were like notorious pickers. They would salvage everything back in the 19th century. So all the trash that would have gone into those privies, they'd be picking it up and recycling it all, taking the bottles back to the glass factories, getting the deposit, taking the rags, taking every artifact they could repurpose or reuse. So whenever those bastards are present on a site, you're basically screwed. But I hate them not because of they're Chinese. I mean, I love Chinese people and everything, and Chinese food is awesome. But I just hate them because of what they did. So if I find out they were on a site, it's terrible because it's like the kiss of death. So you just look in the old advertisement and you look for the hotels that didn't employ Chinese, and then you go and try to get permission for those places to dig.
Well, those are definitely things I would have never even thought about. So we're all definitely learning some new stuff tonight, I'm sure. So I know you've got probably several stories you could share with us, but is there something just wildly crazy, out of this world that you found, or something that happened? Would you mind sharing?
Yeah,
maybe a story or two.
I have
with
a
us?
story off. Yeah, I off the top of my head, I have two stories. One about something that happened, and the other one about something crazy that I found. I mean, which one do you want first?
Okay, whatever you feel like.
The one
I
where
guess we
you.
could do the one that was crazy. Oh, sorry, what, Amanda?
No, I was gonna say do the one with what you found.
Okay, what I found first. I remember I was like hanging out with this old veteran digger guy when I was in college, and I was asking him like, "Man, what's the coolest bottle from San Francisco? What's the rarest, coolest bottle in your opinion?" He's like, "It's the Bank Exchange whiskey bottle." I'm like, "What the hell is the Bank Exchange?" And he's like, "It's a saloon. It was a cosmopolitan saloon built in 1853 in downtown San Francisco, and it was like one of the first. The other one was Barry and Patton Saloon, but it was one of the first, like, very, very elegant saloons on the West Coast. I mean, back then, most saloons in the 1850s were just these, like, grog shops where there was, like, all kinds of prostitution, weird stuff happening inside there, and, like, lewd sex acts happening on a stage to entertain the miners and everything. So in 1853, there's a saloon called the Bank Exchange was built, and it was downtown San Francisco, right on the edge of the bay, of the Old Cove. And apparently, according to this guy, he said that there was a bottle that was produced at the saloon that contained, some of the first liquor that they sold there. And it's embossed on the shoulder. It says Bank Exchange, and then has the proprietors' names on the back, Parker and, I'm forgetting the other name. But anyway, that's going to drive me crazy. Anyway, it's not as relevant. Parker's Bank Exchange is the name of the place. But the coolest thing was that Mark Twain was living in San Francisco in that building above the saloon, and he would go into the saloon, and this was in the early 1860s when he was living there, right around the time that this bottle could have been produced. It's like a late 1850s, early 1860s style bottle. And so he was going into the saloon and drinking and writing. He was writing some of his stuff, and he was coming up with ideas that would be some of his great literary works. One of them being Tom Sawyer. So Tom Sawyer was actually a real person. He was a firefighter in San Francisco, and he would come into Parker's Bank Exchange also, and he sat down next to Mark Twain one day, and him and Mark Twain hit it off. And he got the inspiration for his character, Tom Sawyer, and the name from this real guy. And this all happened in Parker's Bank Exchange, possibly over one of those bottles.
Whoa.
So I was tripping out because, like, I was like doing my thesis in college, and I was doing a class on Mark Twain, and I really liked his books, and I was just really excited to hear that whole story, just reading about it after the guy told me about the bottle. And I had no idea, and I just started thinking about this bottle, like tripping on it for like about a month. I was like, what does this bottle look like? And I'm never going to find it, whatever, but I really want to, but I just got to let this desire go. And I eventually just let it go and, just send it out there into the universe. And I went down to this digging site one day. Oh, and another key piece of information. There's only one specimen of this bottle known to exist in the entire world. 50 years of digging in California, and only one has ever surfaced. It was dug by this hippie dude in the 1960s in San Francisco's South of Market. That's the only one. And so I'm thinking, the chances of finding this bottle are like you'd win the lottery 3 times before you found this bottle. That's how unlikely it is. But I'm tripping on it. I'm thinking about it, and I'm just like, okay, it's time to let it go. And about a month later, I go down to this construction site, and I'm with this lady that kind of taught me how to dig, privies and how to find stuff. And Her name is Judy, and she's like this badass lady. She's like 70 years old at the time when we were going down to this construction site to dig. She had been digging in the Bay Area for 40 years. She knew everything. She's just this badass lady. And I go down there with her, and she probes this pit underneath this concrete footing. And she's like, I think I got one over here, Dad. And I'm like, cool. And I just like, I'm like 21 years old. And I'm like, I'm going to dig, I'll dig this thing so fast. So I get like a 6-foot hole down, and then I start tunneling under the footing. And I'm tunneling so far that I'm like, man, I just can't reach this one bottle. And so Judy comes down there, and she's holding my ankles, and I see this bottle, and I'm trying to get it out. And it's like kind of wedged between these two like big rocks that someone threw down there. Like they target practice, but they missed. They threw 2 rocks down at this bottle after they tossed it into the privy, and trying to make room, by smashing the bottles they throw into the privy. They threw 1 rock, and it landed to the right of it. They threw another rock, and it landed to the left. And you could still see the positioning of those rocks. And the bottle was in the middle, untouched. And I just pulled it out with my hand. She's holding my ankles. She pulls me out. And I just sit up, and I turn it over, and it says Bank Exchange. It was one of the most surreal moments in my life. I couldn't believe it.
Wow.
It was unbelievable.
What a story. Do you still have that bottle?
Oh yeah, it's my favorite bottle. I would never get rid of that. It's that bottle could have been held by Mark Twain.
Yeah.
Easily.
That's just insane to even think about. That's something that's so amazing about our hobbies, is how close you get to touching history, literally touching the past and bringing it to life. And that story right there just shows you, I've never heard that, and I didn't know that about Tom Sawyer either. It's just an amazing story. Thanks so much for sharing that with us.
You're welcome. Yeah, no, that's what really makes the stuff cool. I mean, it's kind of like the principles of archaeology. I'm really into the concept of archaeology in the sense that, context is what's really important the most, and where it was used and where it's from and the site you found it and the positioning on that site. It's all relevant to painting a story of that object. And so that's what I'm trying to convey in my videos, on YouTube, really is like, I thought for the longest time, how am I going to present this content and not have it kind of offend the idea of archaeology, because I believe treasure hunting can start to do that. But when you're just focusing on the object or how much it's worth, but what the really cool thing is what you can learn from it about where you're digging, the site, what happened on that site, and the story behind the object. The object is just an object without the story. But when you know all those facts surrounding it, when you learn all that stuff, when you learn the history of the place where you're digging, the entire area you're digging, if you learn it so well that you just know what's going on and you study that site, and you can basically save a historical record by, preserving the object, but also conveying the story and the context behind the object. And then, so my videos are kind of meant to do that. It's kind of like, here's the story of what's being found and the story of this area and why this stuff is here, as opposed to, ooh, it's worth money. I mean, who cares? Who cares?
Right.
Really.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's so many people ask me, and I know they ask Amanda all the time, what's your most valuable find? They want to know the monetary value. And that's not why we do this,
Nope.
A lot of
That's
people just don't understand.
Yeah.
They don't understand.
That's not why the people with the real passion and heart do it. Some people dig for dollars, and, I mean, more power to them in a sense. I'm not going to criticize people's lifestyle or whatever, but it takes a certain amount of passion and heart to really, not care about that and look beyond the dollars and just think, man, this is really cool. This is like historical.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So true. So tell us about your other story.
Oh, that's kind of less heavy. It's more kind of lighthearted, but I was digging in the middle of the night in a super ghetto area. This is like right after college, and I had this privy going on this job site, and then this tons of just like, I was surrounded by these halfway houses, like these tenements where there were these windows full of all these people trying to, you know, get themselves off of drugs or whatever, or they're just like halfway out of jail for whatever, you know, whatever thing they were incarcerated for. And it's like, I hear someone jumping over the fence when I'm in this privy trying to be low key. I'm like, damn, it's going to be a cop. I'm busted. And it's in the middle of the night. And then there's this like third story window, and this person's like, I'm over here from the window. And this other person on the job site comes out of the darkness. And it's like this woman, and she's like, I'm coming for you, baby. I'm going to get you out of there. And I was like, what? I'm like, so I pretended to be a construction worker, and I was like, hey, you have to leave the site, you know, right now, you're trespassing. And they didn't care. She's like, man, F you. You know, she started swearing at me because it's San Francisco, so they're not going to prosecute you for doing anything. I mean, like, so it's like she should care if I was going to call the cops. And so I was like, ma'am, you have to leave, ma'am. And I was like, I was just out of college. So I was like, ma'am, you got to get out of here, please. So I was like trying to pretend to be all authoritative, but, you know, I was kind of freaked out myself, and she's just brushing me off. So all of a sudden this like dude in like the third story window is like, come on, come up to me, baby. I want to see you one last time before. And she's like, you come down to me. And he's like, no, you come up to me. So for whatever reason, like, these tweaked out people, like this person lowers a bed sheet, like one of those prison escape movies, like all these like pillow sheets or bed sheets tied together. And he's like, come on up to me, baby. And like, so this other tweaker like starts climbing and I'm just like, God damn it, these people are going to get me busted, man. I don't care about these losers. I just want to get the bottles, you know? And so like, normally I wouldn't care, but they were like, you know, they're bringing down heat, man. I was like, please, nobody see him. And I'm like, and I see this lady, and I'm trying to dig as fast as possible. And I'm in this 1860s, just like cake layer. And I'm pulling out all these like cobalt magnesia bottles and all these sodas. And I'm like, oh, this pit's so good. And I'm like, and I'm trying to pull them out as fast as I can, because the cops probably will come at this point, you know, when they see this, somebody sees this shit. And so I'm like, fuck. And then so this lady makes it up to the window, 3 stories up, and then she starts falling. And I'm like, oh my God. And I'm just sitting there watching her. And so there was a couple other people actually digging on the lot also. So we all start throwing this like sand, this fluffy sand, into a pile below where she is to try to make a cushion for her in case she falls. And sure enough, she loses her grip and she falls 3 stories through the air, and she's like, and she just goes, poof, it just hits the sand with the sand pile that we made. And fortunately, she was okay. Or at least I think she was, because, you know, maybe if she was so drunk, she wouldn't have noticed broken bones or something. But like, yeah, she just kind of gets up, and I'm like, now can you leave? And she just stumbles out of the job site, and I'm just like, oh, I'm so glad I can finish digging. I wish I got that on video. That was pre-YouTube days.
So you say that was pre-YouTube days. So how long have you had your YouTube channel?
Not long. You know, it was during the pandemic when I actually thought, you know, I'm not getting, my work just completely died. You know, and it ain't coming back in the same form. And the whole COVID thing just really screwed my whole everything with my like employment stuff. And I was just like, well, you know what? I get the government cheese for a couple of years here. What I'm going to do, I just hatched this idea. I'm just going to make like educational the digs are so fun and cool and interesting to me. And I know they're interesting to a lot of other people if they could be broadcasted somehow. And I thought, you know what, other people deserve to like come on this adventure, because this stuff, you can't make this stuff up. It's like the coolest, to me, it's like the most fun reality TV. I mean, it's also, it can be illegal, I guess, technically, if you're trespassing or whatever. But I'm like, sometimes I have to blur some stuff out or whatever. But like, you know, I'm just gonna screw it. I'm gonna make videos of this. I'm gonna make them fun and just educate people on history and the history of California, and bring attention to some of this history that's going to be lost due to redevelopment anyway. And I'm just gonna, you know, just go and just film all the stuff I do. And I'm just going to do this for 2 years on my unemployment, just do it full time and see where it goes. And then maybe at the end of the 2 years, start begging people for money or something on YouTube, or try to get some something. I'll figure it out. I don't know. It's just something that needs to happen, you know, and you have a calling for this long, your whole life. It's your calling to do this. I mean, what are you going to do? Get some stupid job that you don't like? Or are you going to just pursue your calling and just
do your passion?
Maybe it'll take you somewhere. Maybe it'll take you to jail. Maybe it'll take you both. I mean, screw it. You know, I don't know what else to do at this point. It's destiny.
Wow. That's quite the story. So, I know, Amanda, you probably got a couple more questions.
I sure do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, with digging dumps or anything like that, when you have layers, you end up finding some creepy stuff or some strange stuff that just is out of place. I know you said the hotels that definitely, you know, are visitors from outside the area, but when you've dug these things, do you have like a creepiest thing that you've found or seen?
Yeah. I'm trying to think. Let me think.
It can be more than one as well.
Oh, I remember one. There is plenty. I'm just trying to. There's like my mind is full of this montage of just like a million days of digging. I mean, I've spent every weekend digging for like the last 20 years. Like I don't have a girlfriend. I don't have a family. I don't have I spent the amount of time. This is like obsession gone wild. The amount of stuff, let me think. And lots of weeknights too, by the way, in some of these days. I can think of one thing that was. It's not creepy. It's more gross. Well, it's creepy also. I was probing in this super ghetto area behind these buildings that were about to be demoed, that they were old saloons from the early 1880s, and they were in this super ghetto ass neighborhood. I mean, shootings and everything you can imagine. And because the Bay Area is you know, it's a shithole. It's very ghetto. You know, a lot of crime, a lot of poverty. You know, it's terrible place. But mixed with a lot of like super rich people. It's really weird. But like the ghetto places are, you know, they're rough. I mean, they're not as rough as East LA or something, but they're up there, you know. And so I was in an area where there's a lot of bad stuff happening, but that's kind of where you find the best bot. The best bot is usually found in crumbling areas that are impoverished, because those are the areas with all the old dilapidated buildings. And the reason they're old and dilapidated is because they're old. And if they're old, they have bottles. This was in one of those places, and I was probing, and I hit this. I see this like depression in the ground with kind of a pile of dirt over it that had been rained on, and I was like, "Oh man, is that an outhouse pit that somebody else found and dug? You know, somebody else beat me to it." I'm like, "Damn, this place has already been hit." So I stick my probe. It was basically a filled-in hole that was poorly filled, and then it was rained on, so it sunk out. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so I stick my probe into the low spot, and I hit this like bouncy thing, and I'm like, "Is this like a hole that's been dug and filled with trash, and I'm kind of and I'm pushing the probe, and I penetrate through this bouncy thing, and it just goes, and I'm like, oh, that just made that felt wrong, man. That felt really wrong. And then I like, it was like bone and flesh kind of feeling, even though I swear I don't know what that feels like, stabbing it with a probe. But that's what it was. And I pulled that probe out, and it just smelled like death. And I was like, oh my God, this is a dead person, a person wearing clothes or wrapped in something. And I kind of, the dimension of the hole, this wasn't no dog. This wasn't an animal. It was like it was a 6-foot long, deal with, it was a grave, some kind of gangland type of deal. So I made an anonymous call. I said, it seems like there might be a body buried here. I don't want you to know who I am. Bye. Let the crime scene people deal with it. But like, yeah.
Oh my God.
I don't know what happened. I don't know what became of that, but that was, and I've hit that before, that back in the old days, before, in the really early times, before the city health ordinances took effect, people would bootleg bury their relative in their own yard, back in the really old days. And every once in a while you'll probe a spot, and it's like wood, and then you go through the wood and it's bone, but it's like in a city, you're just like, whoa. It's weird. I remember there was a creepy thing that somebody told me, who was a backhoe operator, and he got to dig in the old San Francisco Embarcadero Cove that was filled in during the gold rush with what I was telling you guys about earlier, like every conceivable type of thing that they'd use as fill to create solid land. But this guy I met on a job site, and he said he was digging with an excavator, and he down in this black mud from the 1850s, excavating for a basement, for a building, for underground parking. And he digs up this big black box, and the mud starts to fall off of it. And he gets off of his piece of equipment, and he goes over to it, and he wipes it off, and there's a glass window, and it's a coffin. And he just looks through the glass window, and there's a dude wearing a full California militia uniform. Like the way he described it, it was like some kind of military garb from before they had a freaking military, in California, some kind of like vigilance committee or whatever had like a uniform in the earliest days of California, or like a cavalry dude. He had a dress sword. He had all the shoulder epaulets. He had the full uniform with the brass buttons. And a skull with a hat on it, a full body, and the superintendent or the foreman, someone ran over and just saw it and just said, "Oh my God, smash that into a million bits right now." And so he told me his boss made him smash it into like 100 million pieces with that backhoe shovel, just just smashing it into the mud until it was nothing. And I was just like, wow, that is really messed up, because that's what they do on those jobs, because time is money, and it costs over 10 grand to have all your shit out there, just your equipment sitting out there with nobody working while the archaeologists do an excavation, which I'm all for, by the way. I obviously think it's awesome if the archaeologists are doing excavations on these sites, because more need to happen, frankly. But they know that it's going to cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars if the archaeologist sees that, and they just want to destroy it before anyone sees that, which is it's just natural, it's just the way it is. But it's really sad. But wow, yeah,
wow, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Man, I bet you've got a million more stories too. I could listen to these all night. I know you do. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. But I know there may be a few more questions that Amanda wants to ask you before we close, but please tell our listeners about your YouTube channel, then they can find you and watch your videos.
Oh yeah, it's Digging the Old West with BottleNed. So that's how you find it on YouTube, and then it's my adventures and education and close-up bot porn shots of extraction of really cool bottles and other artifacts and relics. I mainly try to focus on dirt that's being actively disturbed, that's not being monitored by anyone else but me, trying to get in there and save what I can from the dirt before it's all crushed and destroyed. So it's just me flying around wherever I can, whatever kind of hole or dirty mud pit or under a building or a tree stump or whatever the hell I can get into to find California and other Western history. Travel to different states sometimes. And yeah, it's just adventure and fun and historical education on the history of the American West. Digging the Old West with BottleNed on YouTube.
Awesome.
Love it.
Yeah.
So, are you on any other social media? No, you're on Instagram.
Oh yeah, got the gram. Gotta post some of that stuff on there too. Obviously, just different aspects of my life or historical storytelling. I'll basically use information on what I know to be historically accurate about what I find, and then create a story based on that to fill in the blanks, if you will. Like tell the story of a person who, for instance, used a bottle and the journey of how that bottle came to be where it laid. So I do some of that on Instagram and other just miscellaneous historical and fun stuff. But yeah.
Very cool.
BottleNed on Instagram.
Amanda, you've got some more questions?
Well, to kind of go out with the show, do you want to tell us, besides that bottle, what is your favorite find?
Oh my God. Asking BottleNed what his favorite bottle is, or even just find and check. Oh my God. There's like,
It's really hard.
Okay, there was one thing. All right. When I was 19 years old, here's one. When I was 19 years old, I drove into San Francisco one day, and I was driving around, and I was driving on this freeway, and I see this pile of black mud that was excavated from a place called China Basin, which has the San Francisco Municipal Dump from the 1860s until 1896. And it's just this big place that used to be a bay. It's full. It's 100% dump from the 19th century. And whenever they dig for a sewer connector, they dig out these giant black, smelly, tarry piles of black dump dirt, mud, and they're full of artifacts. And if you can get those piles before they off-haul them to the Class A dump and run them over and destroy it all forever, you can find everything in those piles. So I was 19 years old, drive by, and I see that pile. I drive up to the pile, and there's this like homeless-looking guy, and he's like, "How's it going, man? I'm Gary, and this whole pile is mine." And I'm like, "Man, I don't see your name on it. Get out of my way, loser." You know, like, so I grab my shovel and I start digging next to him, and he's all like, he's kind of pissed off. But then I kind of make friends with him. He's like this guy named Gary Sanguinetti, and he's kind of cool, but he's like kind of like bummy dude with a shitty old car. And he's digging for bottles and whatever he can find also. And I dig up this white thing. I see like a piece of black mud falls away, and he's right next to me, and he's kind of digging pretty close to me. And there's this white thing sticking out. And it looks like the tip of a wiener. I'm not joking. It looks like a dick. I'm sorry if that offends everyone. Basically, I pull it out. To make a long story short, it's a scrimshaw dildo. For anybody that doesn't know what scrimshaw is, it's basically like a tusk or a bone from some kind of marine animal that was harvested by somebody at sea for hunting or eating or whatever. sailors at sea, you know, they had downtime on a ship, and they would sit and they would take a bone and they would whittle it and shape it into an object, a piece of art. It's called scrimshaw. They make art out of something, out of a bone. So obviously the sailor was at sea, and he made his wife, who was waiting for him, you know, kind of with nothing else to do, something that was maybe to keep her occupied so she wouldn't have wandering eyes while he was gone. And it was the most elaborate thing. It was a dildo. It had inscriptions carved into it. And Gary just said, I was digging that. That was right in my hole. That's mine. And he physically grabbed it. He got into his car and he left. And I was sitting there going, oh man. And I'm like a teenager and I'm like, I'll find another one. Never seen another.
You were
Never seen
19
anything like
years
that
old.
in my life.
Oh my gosh.
Never seen another one of those.
Oh my gosh. So you never found another one?
Oh, I wish I had that. Boy, would that be cool.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's a great story for a great ending here. Well,
Cool.
we sure have enjoyed having you on the show. It's been a blast. And y'all be sure and check out his YouTube channel. And thanks again. And man, if you ever decide to come to Texas, I'm sure we could find some great places to dig here. So
I'll find them privies.
come visit sometime. It would be fun.
Texas bottles are good. They're rare.
Yeah.
We do have some pretty cool ones. I mean, maybe not as old, some of them, but
no, there's some good early bottles from Texas. They're just hard.
You
to
probably
find.
know the best places to hunt. Probably way better than I would for the bottles.
Yeah, you just it's all about researching the history of the age,
Definitely.
and who was there in the different towns. Yep.
Most definitely. Well, thanks again. Thanks for being part of the show. We appreciate you. And thank you all for listening tonight. Y'all have a great night.
Good night, all.
See you, everybody. Good night.
Good night, all.